2019 regular scheduled council meeting. If you'd please stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Ziegler.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Beagle.
Here.
Councilmember Gotchall.
Here.
Councilmember Grunland Fox.
Here.
Councilmember Leader is excused. Councilmember Resnick.
Here.
Councilmember Smiley.
Here.
Quorum present.
Thank you. Any changes to the agenda? Mr. Brown?
Your Honor, I have none this evening, no.
Any from up here? Is the attorney coming this evening, or?
She is supposed to, yes.
Okay, I just was curious if she was.
She'll be on just a little bit late.
Okay, that's fine. The first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. There's two sets of minutes that we are dealing with this evening. The first is a budget study session of April 22nd, 2019. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Support.
Any changes, additions, deletions? Mr. Gatchell?
Thank you. Just one note on this, page 11, under the senior citizens budget discussion, I just wanted to clarify, I think in their minutes they mentioned that the entire Wii console was gone, not just a remote, so just a little point of clarification.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. The other set of minutes is the regular city council meeting of April 23rd, 2019. Do I have a motion to approve?
So
Or-
Any changes, additions? Yes, Mr. Gasko.
Thank you. On page 6, under new business number 5, with my comments, right now it reads as if I did think it's a good idea to use the budget stabilization funds for parking lots, rather than I don't feel that way. So I just want to clarify that I still don't think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Oh, opposed? Nobody. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Correspondence, there are 2 items of correspondence. The first is a notice of hearing for the electric customers of DTE Electric Company, case number U-20203. And the second is a city fleet worksheet. Next item on the agenda is the first call to the public, and I'll read the rules for public speaking. The public shall address the council during the call to the public, which shall be included on the agenda immediately after correspondence, and again immediately after new business. The first call to the public immediately after correspondence shall be limited to agenda items only. A person shall not address the council in excess of 5 minutes unless the time is extended by a majority vote of council present. Persons wishing to address the council shall identify themselves and their place of residence and shall state their reasons for addressing the council, and all comments by the public shall be made directly to the council. I'll open the first call to the public, so anybody who wishes to comment on anything on the agenda, please step up and just come up here and state your name, address, and let us know what's on your mind.
Okay. My name is Mark White at 3077 West Maple Road. I think it has to do with item number 7, Cambridge Lane development. I just wanted to point out that the Sibley Drain runs right alongside of it. I live next to the Sibley Drain, and it was cleaned out about a year ago, and somehow they didn't clean it very well. The bottom is very uneven so that it doesn't drain. The bottom line is it doesn't drain very well, so it could be an issue for this development. It could be an issue for all the surrounding homeowners, because water just pools. It drains to a certain point and then it pools, stagnates, so it's an issue for everyone nearby. I don't know what you can do about it, except perhaps send someone in to regrade the bottom of it, change the slope of it so that all the water in it will drain out. So I don't know if that can be done or what cost it would be, but I think that's definitely needed, especially if you're going to start getting a lot of water going through there. They have a reservoir as part of the plan right next to it, so something to consider.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll keep those thoughts in mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mike Walsh, and I live at 3031 West Maple Road, Wixom. And I wanted to kind of follow up with Mark here. He's my neighbor, addressing the drainage. It's called Sibley Drain that the Cambridge development's gonna flow into. I have some documents here from DEQ and a few photos. Would it be okay to give you each a copy of these?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Now, I'd like to
Sir?
do these fairly quickly, just a few photos and a letter from the DEQ. Do you need one over there?
I would like one, please. Thank you.
Well, anyways, this project started out kind of rough a couple years ago. Kevin Gassier. As you can see, this first letter is from the DEQ. And Kevin had purchased 20 acres of land to develop, and it turned out some of that land was wetlands. And I'm not saying that Kevin knew it was wetlands or tried to cover it up, but the DEQ had problems with Kevin's development. He was filling in wetlands, which is stated here, and he was draining wetlands to my property. His project had to be halted, and the wetlands had to be restored to the original condition. Andrew Hartz, I spoke to Andrew Hartz at the DEQ, and I said, Andrew, I understand that there's wetlands back here, and he goes, yeah, and Kevin's going to be responsible to restore these. They were filled and they were drained. And as a developer, again, I'm not saying Kevin knew, but if you buy 20 acres of land, you would think that you would check to see if there's wetlands on that property and what you're going to be able to do. It seemed to me that he didn't know, or there was neglect, but they were being filled in. So that's the letter from the DEQ. You're welcome to read through it. It's pretty clear that Kevin was responsible, and it put his project on halt for about 2 years. Page number 2 is an easement from 1904, May 10th. And this easement has to do with my property. It runs through the western side of my property. And it's signed off by Mrs. Wixom, Mr. Proud Lake, I believe, Grand Trunk Railroad. And on my property, when I purchased my home 20 years ago, there was no easement noted, not on my survey, not on my title, not on my purchase. It wasn't disclosed. I found out when Kevin purchased the land that there was an easement running through my property, and I didn't have a problem with it. Drainage is drainage. I'm not trying to hold off on it. He's like, there's an easement here and we need to clean it out. I was like, okay, so what are you going to do? He goes, we're going to bring in some rakes and some shovels and we're going to clean it out and clean some of the debris out. I was like, great, go ahead. So he proceeded to clean it out. I work from home, so one day I was working and he had a commercial ditch witch with about an 8-foot blade on it back in this drain, Sibley Drain. I was like, what happened to the shovels and rakes? And he goes, oh, we got to cut some roots up. And I was like, okay, well, I let it go. Then there's a backhoe back in there. So he had to backhoe some dirt. The easement states from 1904 that that drain should be 3 foot at the bottom, 3.5 foot at depth, and 12 foot at the top. That is the easement. Well, now my ditch is 6.5 feet deep. It has walls that have no pitch to them. They're almost straight up and down. As Mark stated, the water's not moving through there. It was never wet. It would rain, it would run off underneath West Maple Road, dry out, and that'd be it. That drain has been wet since he's done this work. It was done incorrectly. You can see at page 3, you can kind of see where my property is located at. And I know I'm probably getting up to my time limit. I'm just about done. So I'm on West Maple Road. The top of that page is north. You can see where Wixom Road is. And you can see J.L. Sibley. That's where my home is at. And you can see her section is 32. Any questions on that? You see where it's at there? Okay. Now if you look at page number 4 and the left column, you go all the way down, you'll see section 32. I have it highlighted. At the top it says width at the bottom, which I just stated is 3 feet. Depth is 3.5 feet. And the width surface excavation is 13.5 feet. So that's what was agreed to in 1904. And that's pretty much the way it was before Kevin came to work there. If you look at photo 1, this photo was taken July 18th, 2017, so not quite 2 years ago. And that shows where the ditch was. It was about 3.5 foot, and this is showing when he's first starting to excavate. If you look at page 2, that photo was taken this morning. You can see the side of the ditch. There's water standing. There's about 2 feet of water in that creek. And I measure it to be 6.5 feet deep in that area. And I'd like to say that if anyone from this council would like to visit my property and personally look at that, you're always welcome to. And then I have photo 3. That was another photo, and you can kind of really see where that one tree is on the edge, and that it's just chopped. The roots were cut, and the wall is just about as vertical as this stand here. And I think that drain ought to be restored back to the condition it was. The reason, and I spoke to Andy Hart about it, and I said, Andy, I understand Kevin had wetlands back there. He goes, yes, he did, and he's going to restore them. I go, what about my drain? He cut it down to 6.5 feet deep, and he goes, why did he go that deep, Mike? And I go, well, I believe he went that deep because he wanted to bring that to an elevation that the wetlands would be able to drain into. He goes, you could be right. There's nothing I can do for you, Mike. If you need to do something, you ought to talk to your city. And that's why I'm here. But he did all this work, and then it kind of all blew up into a major deal, and found out there was wetlands, but he was just going with this work, and he's going to fill everything in. Again, I'm not sure he knew it, but everything was being filled in and drained and running through my property. It should have been 3.5 feet deep, and it's 6.5 feet deep, and I'd like to have it restored back to 3.5 feet. And I'd like to see the water, I'd like to see it on a grade that water is going to be able to run off. So that's my concern, and I'm not saying Kevin did this purposely. He seems like an okay guy, but as a developer, that was a lot of neglect on his part. So if you have any questions for me, I'll be glad to answer them.
I've got a question. I had a brief conversation, first time I met you, had a brief conversation with you before the meeting started, and I asked you the question, did you bring this to the attention of the Planning Commission when I was going through the Planning Commission? I'd just like you to share that answer with me so that...
I did. This is really the second time I've ever addressed the Planning Commission or the council. And but when I addressed the Planning Commission, I didn't know that I had to do the first call to meet, first call to the public.
Right.
So I did the second call. So it's noted on there, but I guess it didn't have the impact if I would have addressed it to the first call of the public.
Did anybody comment to you about...
They said that there would be another meeting to address it to. And I was like, great, I've been kind of watching for it, but I know someone that's on the Planning Commission, actually a few, and they said, hey, there is a meeting coming up today, you might want to attend that.
Okay.
So that's why I just found this out yesterday, so.
All right, thanks. Mr. Gosseley, you had a question?
Just regarding what you have labeled as photo number 2 here, it looks like there's some of the netting that's usually used to keep down after someone seeds for grass.
Sure.
Is that on your side? Is that your house in the background? Or
That is Mark's house in the background. That is west of that. That drain is running north and south, and that's Mark's home over there west of the drain.
And so why was that netting put in? Was something planted or to stop erosion? Or
It was
that
put in, and
evident?
actually it was put in after the fact. The Drain Commission came to look at the work that was done, because I had spoke to them, and they were like, well, he ought to put some some soil erosion in here. So he came back weeks after and lined that through there. And actually, to tell you the truth, if you went over there now, a quarter of that seed took. It's still a lot of the plastic netting that they use to retain the seed.
And you said that was done last year or this?
This was done about 2 years ago. Well, this photo was taken, that was July, so just about 2 years ago. It'd be 2 years this coming July 2019.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Any questions? Thank you for your comments.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nick Spagnolo. Address is 3066 Bennington Drive here in Wixom. I just wanted to say thank you to the city and the council for taking the canvassing issue seriously and moving to speedily resolve that before the school board election. Just wanted to share a couple of stats with you in terms of Wixom and their turnout for the city school board election. There are 54 precincts in the Walled Lake Consolidated School Districts, and Wixom had 3 of the top 10 precincts in terms of turnout for that election. So Wixom had the chance to really get out and learn about the issue and had a chance to come out and vote on it. Of the 12 cities in the Walled Lake Consolidated School District, Wixom placed second in terms of voter turnout. So again, having the opportunity to go out and talk to people about this issue definitely ended up having a real world effect on the turnout of people to come vote on it and the result of that election. So I thank you for working to make sure that that was an opportunity that was available to the citizens of Wixom. One thing I did want to mention moving forward, however, and not necessarily related to this issue particularly, but we had 3 precincts in the top 10. As you know, we have 4 precincts in Wixom. Of the 54 precincts that are available in the Walled Lake Consolidated School District, Wixom Precinct 3 finished dead last. We had about 1.5% voter turnout. We had about 10 times that turnout in all of the other precincts. So just as this particular issue that we're going to discuss tonight and other issues come up, just keep in mind that there is a section of the city that is not necessarily involved in the goings-on, and especially the change that we're asking to make tonight won't necessarily make the ability to reach out to those people in the apartments and condominiums and what have you any easier. So just think of ways to perhaps get those people more engaged in the civic responsibilities and make sure that they have an avenue of some sort, even if people can't physically go in there and talk to them about the issues that might be available to them. I just wanted to make sure that there was clarification going into talking about the agenda item. The agenda item that we're looking to see changed is ordinance number 5.10.079.b, looking to remove canvassing as a class of speech that can be banned by neighborhoods. That's the only change we're looking to see. Anything else is outside of the scope of that particular discussion. If there's other things that would like to be looked at, that's great, but I just want to make sure that unlike what happened the previous time that this ordinance was taken up, that there are other issues that don't muddy the waters or get people confused, that we can kind of focus on that particular aspect of it for perhaps one avenue, and then if other people want to, or other parts of the ordinance want to be discussed, maybe do that separately from this particular aspect of it. That's all I got.
Do you mind a few questions?
Sure, absolutely.
Just, have you had a chance to review what the changes are for tonight?
I have not seen, all I saw was the agenda item. I have not seen the actual proposed changes.
So the proposed changes, while there's some other ones regarding to issues not
Sure.
mainly contained in the temporary restraining order, regarding signs, what was proposed was basically completely eliminating the ability of neighborhoods to have signs out front, not limiting language. And you had mentioned canvassing is the issue at stake. Would it be acceptable then to allow signs, but just to say no peddling?
Yeah, so I never wanted to remove the ability for neighborhoods to put signs up altogether or to be able to ban peddling or soliciting. I know that when soliciting was kind of brought into the issue in the fall or in the winter of last year, that kind of got people's hackles up because of perhaps misunderstanding about what soliciting means. If that's the path that City Council wants to take, I mean, that's obviously your purview. No signs or signs without canvassing, I guess either way, it meets my needs and the needs of the people concerned here. But the other things, I guess I leave to you. And I guess I would ask, where are those proposed amendments? I will get to it soon enough, but is it on the county web or the city website or?
I mean, it's in our packet. I don't know that it's on the website or anywhere else right now, because is this a mandatory? We have to vote tonight and then vote again at the next meeting?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Tonight,
Yeah.
and then
This is
enact-
introducing it.
Yep.
The other question I had was regarding like private homeowners having signs on their like front door, side light. That's fine as well.
Absolutely, yeah. No one was ever questioning the ability of private homeowners to put something on their house. On the weekend before the election, I went out canvassing, probably went to 30 or 40 homes. I kind of just drove around the city and looked to see neighborhoods that had a high percentage of people with those signs out in support of the school board issue. Tried to knock on the doors. If I ever saw anyone have a sign on their door, if somebody had a no soliciting sign on their door, I didn't knock and try to raise the issue. Oh, I'm canvassing, I'm not soliciting, so you didn't necessarily ban me from your property. I don't think anyone's trying to adjust people's abilities to do that. Just the city or the neighborhood-wide signs for canvassing specifically, and then other things I'll leave to your judgment to do.
I appreciate it, but I wanted to ask because some of the changes we have even go a little bit further than what I was proposing a few months ago.
Sure.
So that's why I wanted to clarify, we want to make sure that we rectify the issue hopefully, but also understand that we don't want magic windows bothering
Absolutely.
people at the same time.
Yeah, I totally am on board with that as well. I don't want that to happen either.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Resnick?
I mean, just one other comment on related to Precinct 3. Precinct 3 has historically been an extremely low turnout voter, and it's very, very much parallels other communities that have short-term rentals with
Sure.
transient communities. So that concentration in Precinct 3 is short-term rentals as well.
I guess I would just say that Michigan Liberation, who was also part of the suit, they did heavy canvassing in Precinct 3 leading up to the 2018 elections, and I think that Precinct 3 had about 10 times greater voter turnout than they normally have in a similar election. So
Presidential, yeah.
yeah, but it was actually not a presidential; it was a midterm. So I mean, it was more important perhaps than a school board issue, perhaps. But in terms of a midterm, non-presidential election, they had significantly higher turnout than they necessarily would have otherwise have expected. So they went out there. I'm not sure if necessarily how the ordinance necessarily relates to those types of facilities and the rental spaces and whatnot. But if people do have the opportunity to go talk to them, that we could see the turnout. Just that it's a lot harder to do it there, and I understand and respect those complications.
And those were a lot different than school board elections.
Totally understand. Thank you.
Anybody else? All due respect to your efforts and your canvassing, and I tend to think that the large turnout was attributed to your mayor going on the line to make an advertisement along with several other notables. And
I definitely agree, and I
think that was what the big turnout was all about.
I tend to agree.
Thanks for your comments.
Yeah.
Anybody else wanting to come and address any agenda items this evening?
Ola Lewis, 2544 Pine Drive, and mine was pertaining to number 6 also, about the no soliciting, because we have Oakland newspapers and they just throw them, they don't put them on the porch, they just throw them in the driveway, and a lot of times in the winter we have residents that aren't there and they just stay there. We're a property that does not have maintenance people on. We have to hire somebody, to go out and do that. So that's what I was concerned about, and you just address the issue about magic windows or whatever coming in and all of that, and that's what we were concerned about, because we do have a sign of the no soliciting to sell us stuff, and that's what we our residents, because folks were knocking on the door, and that's what we didn't want. That's why we put the signs up 20 years ago. So hopefully we can keep those up, because they don't say. We've always invited the mayor and whoever's coming in to do their canvassing. No problem with that. It's just the papers, the pizza delivery stuff all over the neighborhood. So that's what we were trying to eliminate. So that's fine.
Thank you. Anyone else this evening wishing to address the council on any agenda items? Seeing none, I'll close the first call to the public. Next item on the agenda are the city manager's reports. We have 2 this evening. The first is the fire monthly report for March 2019. Does anybody have any questions, comments? Mr. Resnick.
One question for Chief Roberts. It looks like, again, March had about 10% of the calls and dispatch runs were for false alarms. You know, it begs the question, are these repeat offenders? Because we seem to be spending a lot of time in the runs on false alarm calls.
We did have a couple of businesses that had repeated problems with their alarm system, but we have resolved those issues, so unfortunately. I believe it's 3.25 we give them free, and then they're billed.
And they're billed after that? Okay. All right, thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Jeff. The other report is the police monthly report of March 2019. Anybody? Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. All items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests, in which event the items will be removed from the consent agenda and added to the regular agenda at the end of unfinished or new business. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda passes. Next item on the agenda is unfinished business. I think it would be appropriate to ask Mr. Smiley to excuse himself at this point.
Consider myself excused.
We won't go on without you, believe me. I really, this item is considered a matter that is, that has attorney-client privilege attached to it, and therefore, really, I think that before we discuss anything on it, it has to come out of that, that umbrella. And so I would entertain a motion from anybody who might like to make a motion to make this item come out of the umbrella of attorney-client privilege. Mr. Beagle.
I'll make a motion to waive attorney-client privileges on the investigative report on Wixom Community Foundation Scholarship Award in 2018.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can we do that?
Can we do?
Can we, if it's from the attorney to us, it's presumed that it's attorney-client privilege when it's from our
Right.
attorney. Can we waive that?
Yeah, it's ours, and we're a party to it. We're able to do that. Oftentimes do it. Sometimes it doesn't take a motion like this. Generally, we have a closed session to discuss it, and then perhaps we'll come out of a closed session and make a motion based on what we discussed in the closed session. This in particular, we aren't having a closed session because the idea of it was raised too late and it's already in the agenda, so. Does that make sense? I don't want to.
It does. I just don't know if I agree with it, I guess.
Okay. Yes, please.
Add a comment to that. You know, when we look back at this agenda item in particular, it was brought forth by citizens who were deeply concerned. And my opinion is that we should waive attorney-client privilege and get it out in the open and include the report.
Mr. Gosh.
Thank you. I guess just my understanding of privilege is it's our privilege, our cover, basically. So if we decide we're well within our means to waive our privilege and our cover essentially on that. So I don't think we're doing anything wrong. We're just putting it, as Councilmember Resnick said, out in the public view. It's no longer just between ourselves and the attorney at that point.
Is it the intent to actually read the letter from the attorney or just discuss the content?
Well, until it's decided whether it should be something that we can talk about in public, it's tough for me to say that. I mean, I don't think that I would be comfortable reading a report in the record, but, I mean, that,
Okay.
there might be a synopsis if that's,
If we're not gonna do that.
okay. All right. We have a motion to waive the attorney-client privilege. All in favor, and a second, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. I don't want to belabor this report. It's a report that was requested back in August relating to city council members, or two actually at the time, that were connected both with the Wixom Foundation and the city council. And the question was raised whether or not there was a conflict of interest and whether or not there was any discredit brought upon the city council as a result of the actions of the individuals. And it was decided through a motion that we would hire a third party to investigate, to answer those questions. And that's been done, and the report has come back. And again, I don't want to belabor it. I think that just as a synopsis, I can say that the report, I think, should be made public and should be attached to the record here, and should be made available if anybody wants to go to the clerk's office and request a copy. And just for the record, I think it's enough to just simply indicate that the third party, the attorney that was hired to investigate, make the investigation, do the investigation, came back with a report that indicates that, in fact, there was no discredit placed upon the city council as a result of the actions of Councilman Kennedy or Councilman Smiley. There was no apparent conflict of interest relative to their positions. And in fact, Mr. Kennedy isn't even addressed in the investigation. Mr. Smiley is. And there's no conflict of interest as it relates to Mr. Smiley's participation on city council and on the foundation. There is some fault that's cited as it relates to his position with the foundation, and that's all I intend to indicate on it. If anybody would like to add anything or discuss anything, I'd be open to a discussion. Or does anybody?
Yeah, I think just a final comment from my end is, it's up to each and every one of us to bring it to council's attention when an item comes up and you feel it may be a conflict of interest. And in the case where there's doubt, contact the city attorney through Mr. Brown and get it cleared up prior to the meeting.
If there's no other discussion, I would entertain a motion to receive and file the report and to add it to the minutes of the council meeting. And if somebody would like to make that motion.
I'll make that motion.
So, a second?
Okay, a motion's been made and a second. Any discussion? Please.
So will the actual letter from the attorney be made part of the record?
Yes, it'll be attached. That's the motion, as attached to the minutes as a part of the minutes of the meeting, and then they'll be available at the clerk's office in the events a private party wants to take a look at it. Okay, any other discussion? Any questions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is new business. First item under new business is the consideration of the mayoral appointment of Vanessa Willett to the Downtown Development Authority with a term to expire June 30th, 2023. Do I have a motion? Vanessa, would you like to come on up and introduce yourself? And I know that you were in the film that was made, and so we want to. Yeah,
Did a great job.
we tried to win. Yeah.
I'd just like to say that, one of the reasons, I've been doing a few extra things within the city. The video, I was able to work Derby Day, which was fantastic. We had a great turnout. Little issue with some of the drivers, but the police did a great job supporting us. And I really look forward to kind of being more active and helping the DDA and making sure the businesses that are here are successful and stay, because it's good for all of us as homeowners, as business owners, and as a city as it grows. So I really look forward to that.
Great. Anybody have any questions?
Refreshing to see the energy on DDA.
Yeah,
Great.
I'm excited.
Yeah, and there is a lot of energy on the DDA these days.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No one. Well, great.
All right.
Unanimous. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for your volunteerism. And did you want to introduce your son there?
Stand up, Reed. This is Reed Willett. He's learning about how city politics go and the city council and
All
how
right.
everything works, so he can be involved too.
Well, welcome.
He worked Derby Day as well.
Good. I was going to run this year in Derby Day. But this year was different because I had to, I know I wanted to get this in. This year is different because I had to miss it because it was May 4th and May 3rd was my 50th wedding anniversary. Now, I don't know, it was my wife's 50th wedding anniversary. I don't know, I can't be that old. But we decided to go away, and so we were away for the weekend. But I wanted to be there, and I was there in spirit. So I appreciate my wife for putting up with me for 50 years. So anyway, next item on the agenda is a recommendation to approve a revised agreement for high-volume calling for 2 years with AT&T of Atlanta, Georgia, and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement on behalf of the city. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Any discussion? I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is a recommendation to extend the Water System Cross-Connection Control Program contract with Hydro Corporation, Inc. for 3 additional years for an annual amount of $33,072, and to authorize the mayor and the clerk to sign the agreement. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion?
Maybe a question for Mr. Sigma. How effective has the program been in terms of cross-contamination?
The program itself has been very effective. One of our key things is to do it progressively. So each year we do a portion of it. It reduces the risk of problems within the system. So you have a portion that's industrial and commercial, and the inspectors walk through the buildings to make sure that there are the proper backflow prevention items in place. Now, they do also a residential, but they don't do inspections in the home for that. It's primarily for irrigation systems, and they do quite a bit outside, just looking for the irrigation systems and stuff, but they don't inspect inside. And it's been good, and the state has been satisfied with the results that they have. In fact, usually when they submit, there are no questions from the state.
So a question that comes up,
Yes.
do they supply hose bibs to the residents if they go to a resident?
Yes, and in fact, that's one of the things that they've added, additional hose bibs. So they'll give up to 6 hose bib connections now for that. And that's an added value, I think, that it helps the inspectors so that they don't have to come back and re-inspect, but then it also helps the homeowners by not having to go anywhere to get something that qualifies them for the programs.
Very good, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we have a motion and a second to extend the Water System Cross Connection Control Program contract with Hydro Corporation, Inc. for 3 additional years for an annual amount of $33,072 and authorize the mayor and the clerk to sign the agreement. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Thank you. Item number 4 is a recommendation to award additional construction engineering to the city engineering firm Hubble, Roth and Clark in the amount of $35,250 and approve the associated budget amendment to complete the 2018 industrial road construction maintenance program. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Discussion, anybody want to? Yes,
I
please.
just have a comment. I already talked to Tim prior to this, but I had just asked about if we can make sure that we go back to the contractor and find out if we can recoup some of those costs.
So
He had said they would.
we'll be looking into that, yeah, to try and recover costs. We're still under the construction season, and the contractors themselves haven't come back to ask for additional funds, but there was, a significant loss throughout the industry, and if we can recover some of that, we will try to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gottschall.
So you said the contractor hasn't come back to ask for more money? This is simply for HRC to do
Right.
more engineering?
So it's more inspection days, basically. So what, they were able to do a portion of the items throughout last fall, and they didn't anticipate extending, the additional 5 months into, well, actually, it'll be well into June by the time they're finished now. And there were various setbacks to the inspection program, and that's why we had to add in those factors. Now, the company themselves, they did less at a given time than we had anticipated, so there are other items there, if that makes sense.
I guess it's tough because I know with other projects had in the past, we get a breakdown of here's this person at HRC and how many hours they're going to be working. So if there was a work stoppage, no one should have been inspecting, you would imagine.
The one item that the contractor came back with was they were able to get an additional contractor that was outside of their group and was able to do some of the work outside of the original contract or the original supplier of, they were able to finish some of that work, but it was restaged, if you will. So Commerce Construction came in and helped through a portion of that, and that's why we have the additional time.
I guess it's just odd to me because when we bid this out, we bid it out as a project and things take longer sometimes, obviously. This was a labor issue. So I don't know, it just kind of strikes me odd if the contractor hasn't come back to ask for more money and HRC wouldn't have been really working on the project if the contractors were not working on the project. How did we go over budget with engineering?
So again, they streamlined, HRC streamlines what they anticipate the number of work days that they're going to be inspecting. And when it extends out, they're still getting calls from the contractor. They still have to respond to the residential. There are items that they have to continue to do. So.
What happens if this isn't approved?
Then we won't have an inspector.
Okay. And there's no, I don't know, it's extremely odd to me, I guess, that we're being told that the project stopped but somehow we were still on the clock with engineering costs and inspection time when literally nothing should have been happening. And I drove by there every day and no one was working on, this is West Road mainly, right? All the projects around that area, the industrial parts.
Magellan, Cartier, Lori
So-
Lane, Avante.
If it's a labor issue and no one's working on the project, there's nothing to inspect. And it's not, you had mentioned residential, this isn't by residential.
Yeah.
So it's just like,
It doesn't.
I guess it's curious to me how we would be coming up with another 35,000. I understand it went past the expected time frame, but it's not like they were doing inspections while no one was working. To me, if you say inspector is gonna do 100 inspections in this project and then everybody gets a month off, you still have that portion left.
Yes.
So I don't know why we're
So,
being asked to
We
spend.
did have a table that broke down the additional costs and what they had expected to spend them on. And they are there and they're legitimate. When we initially had a HRC bid this work, typically they do have contingency plans in place to cover this kind of expense. And if you recall, there was some questions with the amount that was being charged at that time. So they brought it down to their minimum, if you will, without contingencies. And this is a contingency that they couldn't use.
What percentage was held? Because I feel like in the past when we've discussed this, I think the number 20% was used as like what we should be using as a contingency added on to any project.
That is a typical number for engineering. I don't know if I have that here. This was a $1.3 million project, and they had just over 100,000 invested in the CE, the construction engineering.
But, so we don't know what the contingency addition was though? Because if it's 20% on a $1.3 million project.
They didn't have a contingency on the
So
original
they just
bid.
removed it.
It was, yes.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Smiley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I read this report, and correct me if I'm wrong, this isn't necessarily counter to what Councilman Gotcha was trying to say, but it wasn't really, I mean, work stopped, but it went from being, you use the word streamlined, which is how I kind of took this, is it was streamlined because the work got spread out over, due to the stoppage, which was, nobody's control.
Right.
That's what, contributed to the additional work being needed, additional engineering work being needed. Is that
That's it, yeah.
true? Okay. And then there's additional work that got added on as well throughout the process that
so the-
also contributes to it?
The additional work that had, the original contractor, they had a subcontractor that assisted that wasn't or they didn't initially plan to use. But because of their connections with asphalt companies and whatnot, they were able to utilize this other company and
Was that
not
that
go around,
supplement somebody else's work? It didn't necessarily add or subtract to the engineering bill?
Right.
Okay.
And so.
So that, there was
It-
not additional.
That was
work.
additional work for engineering, yes.
Oh, it was?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I could try to clarify a little bit, if the projects had all taken place at one time, there would have been X number of weeks of effort and on-site presence from HRC. Because it was done a little bit piecemeal, because some of this work was picked up by another construction company, some work was done in the preceding, at the beginning of the construction season, which still required HRC to do inspection work, but now we're going to come back and finish that construction project with additional work in this segment of the construction year, this season. So they're going to have to come back and do additional inspection work that wasn't anticipated. It was going to be done at one time. There would have been a certain level of effort required from HRC and associated billing. Instead, it was spread over 2 different seasons, if you will, and the length of time they have to be on site and doing work has been increased. Am I incorrect on that in any way?
No, that's correct.
Okay, so you're dealing with the anticipation was everything would be wrapped up in one time, and HRC would have had a certain level of billing associated with that. Instead, some of the work was done last year, if you will, and some of it's being done this year. So there's added presence required from HRC, which requires added billing from HRC because it wasn't done the way it was intended. They weren't able to combine the efforts into one effort. It's being spread over 2 different periods of time, therefore increased billing from HRC.
That's what I said.
I hope so. I was trying to clarify. Maybe I just totally
I appreciate
repeated
it.
it.
No, that's
So.
fine. But that's how I.
Mr. Resnick.
I just want to clarify, so, and this goes back to Councilperson's Brennan Fox, her question. We will attempt to get some recovery of these costs
We are going to.
from the construction company.
Yes, but the construction company wasn't at fault. It was their supplier of,
Supply.
yeah, so it wouldn't come from our contractor.
One of
It
theirs,
would come
okay.
from the, yeah, the
So
supplier.
attempt will be made.
Yeah.
All right,
something like that.
thank you.
Mr. Beagle.
Thank you. I do appreciate these staff hour projection charts, because it does give us a good breakdown. But under contract administration, there's 3 pay estimates. What exactly is that?
So there's as work gets progresses, they itemize the bills based on the different
When a job is done?
yeah.
They
go
pay
through
authorized payment.
Each of the qualifications, and they step that down.
I don't remember seeing that before. Maybe it was, but I didn't see it before, so thanks.
Anybody else? Mr. Scott.
Thank you. I guess just as a follow-up to some of the other questions, when we sign these contracts for work of this magnitude, do we have language in there for like work stoppages and clawbacks, like almost similar to what we have with tax abatements where we can claw back or things go down if you're not performing?
There is some language, and I can't quote it, but I know there is language in there regarding that, and just like there is for acts of God or other emergencies or something. So they're not always in our benefit on those.
Thank you.
One of the things that I keep hearing people say here is there's a work stoppage, and generally speaking, people think of a work stoppage as a strike. This was not a strike that took place last summer. This was a lockout by the employers and the employer associations that do the bargaining with the unions, and I appreciate the idea of trying to go back and get the employers, or the contractors who are the employers, to I guess take some responsibility in being the moving party in the stopping of the work. Again, it wasn't a strike; it was a lockout, and I think that would be a good argument to use when you're going back to talk to those people and trying to get them to come up with some of the reimbursement on this money. Having said that, we have a motion and a second to award additional construction engineering to the city engineering firm Hubbell, Roth & Clark in the amount of $35,250 and approve the associated budget amendment to complete the 2018 industrial road construction maintenance program. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Next item on the agenda is a recommendation to adopt a bond authorizing resolution for limited tax general obligation capital improvement bonds for wastewater system improvements. Do I have a motion?
So moved?
Support.
Do we have a little presentation or anything on this?
Just some brief comments and summary on what we've been trying to accomplish here. I will let you know, for those of you who have never met Jeffrey Aronoff, he's with us tonight. He's our bond counsel, also responsible for creating these fine resolutions that we bring before you. And he's here if you have any additional questions that I may not be able to address for you. On April 23rd meeting, City Council gave the authorization to publish the notice of intent resolution for these wastewater bonds. That notice of intent was put in the May 1st edition of the Spinal Column newspaper. So that brings us to tonight of the next step of the process, to ask the City Council to authorize the bond authorizing resolution. Excuse me. What that does is it gives the city manager and I the authority to move forward with the bond process. We cannot issue those bonds until after the 45-day referendum period expires, which would be 45 days from the date of notice in the paper, which would take us to about midpoint of June. So what we anticipate is the issuance right around mid-July, once they get all of the official statements and all of the other work that we have to do leading up to that bond sale. So that's where we are this evening. I'm just asking for that resolution to be approved so that we can move forward with issuing those bonds by mid-July.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions, comments? Mr. Resnick?
Just, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what's the outlook in terms of the market for mid-July?
I think we're looking at like 3.5% is approximately what we had on the estimate, but that can change. So we won't know until we get closer to that, but it's fairly favorable at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mr. Gottschalk?
Thank you. I think I had mentioned when we did the notice, or I had a question about it at that time, because we didn't really have a lot of numbers as we did with the legacy cost bonding out. And I asked Mr. Sigma a few questions before the meeting. What is our spread right now between what we're bringing in revenue and what's going out as an expenditure? Because this has always been a very tight item for us.
Yes, and I don't have that exact number with me because I wasn't prepared for that.
Okay.
We have had our rate consultant look at all of these expenditures. We also gave her the estimated bond payment schedules on a 20-year, 25, and 30-year repayment to look at those to see what we can afford with the rate structure that we've been following and what we had anticipated the increases to be in order to accommodate these projects. So what came out of it was basically we could afford to do either three of the alternatives. So most likely what our preference would be is to keep that as a 20-year repayment, to keep that interest cost as low as we possibly can. But it has been looked at in depth. These numbers have been ran through at least out to a 10-year level, looking at our current revenues and expenditures. And we're still running at a positive circumstance that our revenues will be coming in higher than our expenses, and we will be able to continue to grow that cash balance as we had wanted to build that cash reserve back up.
By virtue of doing this bonding,
That's correct.
if we hadn't, we'd be spending into the cash available and putting us in a tighter position than we're prepared to accept, I guess is the best way to summarize it.
Yeah, correct. Without spreading this payment out over the 20 years at least, if we were to try to accomplish these projects with cash on hand, we would basically be right around the $800,000 point within 2 years. And that's not a very healthy place to be.
No, and the main question, I guess, was making sure, because we're trying to get to a point where we're not losing money on this, and so it's almost difficult to discuss then bonding out when it's never been like a good budget line item for us at times because things have been subsidized. And you had said maybe mid 3% on interest rates. I believe it's water, the projections are 3.5% per year increase. I'm trying to remember what we've projected annually as the increase when we go to budget study, because I believe wastewater was higher, and I want to say like 7.5 or 9.5, something like that, but I just didn't recall sitting here now.
Yeah, it's right around 7.5. We came in a little bit lower than what we had originally anticipated. We had originally anticipated more around 9.
Okay.
And we were able to still, with this whole scenario taking place, because this has always been plugged into those figures, that we were able to come in with an increase a little bit lower than what we had originally thought we would have to do. So, and we hope that continues to be the case. We are always very conservative with our sewer tap revenue, because it's very hard to anticipate what type of development is going to actually occur. So usually when we're building these rate structures going forward, we're very conservative on those sewer tap revenues, just because we don't want to create a rate structure and those sewer taps don't occur, then we find ourselves trying to make up too much ground to get where we need to be.
As a clarification and correction, I just looked it up in the budget work session minutes on page 19. 3.5% on the water and 9.9% on the wastewater.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt a bond authorizing resolution for limited tax general obligation capital improvement bonds for the wastewater system improvements. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a consideration of the introduction of an ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances for the City of Wixom, Chapter 5.10, Peddlers, Solicitors, and Canvassers, Section 5.10.079, including the removal of language pertaining to the private posting of signs prohibiting peddling, soliciting, canvassing, or trespassing at each entrance to subdivisions, condominiums, or other neighborhoods. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Support.
This has been an issue that, as I've indicated before, has come before council on many occasions. I was hoping that the attorney might be here this evening because I had some points, and I know that I've talked to the city manager about them, but it's my understanding that the last time that the language was redone, that the attorneys were involved in it, in redoing it to try to update it with current changes in the law and case law that took place, and they were pretty confident that the language that they developed and presented to us and ultimately was enacted was appropriate language, and that it was language that was legal and didn't violate anybody's rights. And in fact, it's my understanding, based on conversation with the attorney, Ms. Rosati, that in fact the ACLU was involved in the case that caused us to rewrite the statute back then, and that the language was run by the attorney for the ACLU at that time, and there was no objection to it. So I think that might be part of the reason that the attorney felt that our language was defendable. And I personally think, based on what she was telling us, I thought at the time this last came up that our position was defendable, and I haven't changed my mind on that. I think it's something that it is now since the lawsuit was filed, a couple of things have occurred. One thing is the attorneys have gone back to the drawing board, taken a look at it, looked up case law. The case law is apparently, based on my discussions with the attorney, is very strong relative to the idea that individuals can put up a sign suggesting no soliciting and no peddling and all those things on their own personal residence, and there's a lot of case law that supports that. There is no case law, however, on these blanket signs, and that's the report that we get back now, which is a little more thorough of a report than we had last time we talked about this. And I guess my opinion is that we got a couple of different options. One is we can fight and try to develop case law, but I don't think that's in the best interest of the city and the parties involved. And I don't think it's fair to the subdivisions that relied on the language that we passed to come up with those signs. You know, I took a look at the suggested language that was presented here. I guess my preference would be to address the issues of canvassing and make sure that is changed so that there's nobody's going to put up a sign in front of a subdivision that says no canvassing. We're not going to have in our ordinance that prohibits canvassing. But I guess I would like, and I think that was one of the points that was brought up a little earlier in the meeting tonight, I would like to see the ability for the subdivisions to have a sign that does have a peddling address. And I think that that's a fair compromise. I think that it's helpful to the individuals, and I'm not going to name any companies, but we all know what we're talking about. You know, companies like that that have a reputation of coming around and bothering people, even if you do have signs. But I think that it would be appropriate to leave the language in the ordinance that allows for those signs, but just make sure, and I think that was one of the points that Mr. Gottschall made in his motion back in November, I think it was December, and I think that was one of the points he wanted to change that so that they weren't able to include canvassing. And I'm still kind of confused about the soliciting, because I you know, heard the gentleman up here, Nick, come up and say that, soliciting is okay. I guess I want to know that it's okay. And the other point I guess I would like to make before we do anything, as far as passing a new ordinance, I want to make sure that at least for 6 months or so, it's going to be good and everything's settled. I want everything, if we can do that. I don't know if you can tie that to a motion, but it certainly would be helpful to us if we knew that if we enter into this and our attorneys look at it, the plaintiff's attorneys look at it, and they're satisfied, then we ought to be able to make sure that we're not due in court someday, or that we're not going to get sued again, 6 months later. So I'd like everybody to be happy on this, and I'd like to save the cost of developing case law, good or bad. So from our perspective, those are my comments on it. Anybody?
Just, I echo those comments. I'd like to see us clean it up on both ends with the wording and make sure that whatever we have is defensible. Just another note too, last week the city of Troy announced that all peddlers and solicitors are given a list of the keep-out housing areas that the specific residences that do not allow it, and that's included along with their solicitors and peddlers license. And that might be something that we think about, some sort of online way for people to register their residences, and then the peddlers and solicitors are notified of that when they go to City Hall to pick up their license. So if someone wants to investigate that, maybe city manager, if you could take a look into that.
Yeah, I'll talk with the city attorney about that. That would be maybe something along the lines of the provisions of the ordinance, however it ends up being completed to enactment, if it does get enacted. So in other words, if you end up saying, let's still continue to allow subdivision signs, but only excluding things other than canvassing. So in other words, we would still not allow a blanket sign for a subdivision to prohibit canvassing. So you could say something along the lines of in the ordinance that it would be subject to the restrictions contained in the ordinance, and something referencing this listing that may or may not be complete. In other words, if somebody hasn't signed up for the listing but still has a sign on their home, you wouldn't be allowed to go there either, right? So that would be something we would probably have to talk about with the attorney about how to address that. So that's something we could do, sure. And just if I can, before anybody else makes a comment, I want to put something else up for discussion from my perspective. I think I'm clear on what is being potentially talked about here in terms of still allowing signs, but but removing canvassing from the prohibitions that would be allowed by those kind of signs. I think if that's the way it turns out, I understand that. But something that's not contained in the proposal or the amended ordinance as it stands is something I want to bring up for discussion and it's something I'm a little bit of a mixed mind on. In the past, we had the guidance for the sign's size. When somebody has a sign on their individual home, it has to be this many inches by that many inches and a font size of this much, and I kind of chuckled at that a little bit from the standpoint of do we really need to have that kind of a guideline in the ordinance? But at the same time, if we don't address that, things could get a little odd from the standpoint of what the signs could look like, right? And if we do provide some guidance as to what the signs ought to look like, that's something I want to know if you have a preference for that being present in the new ordinance, or if you think that is something we should also exclude from the ordinance on this amendment, if that's clear. I tried.
I'm not going to answer that. Mr. Gasso.
I have a few comments, I guess, in looking this over. And kind of to my mind, I think this was originally adopted before I was on council in 2014, I think. So it's almost like as if you just rewind the clock or you reset it to how it used to not be messed up, would be the best way to go about it. In terms of I think I've seen some people in other areas with tiny signs like hidden next to their door. So
Exactly.
or you could have someone that wants to prove a point and put one of those inflatable ones outside, basically.
Right.
So I think there do need to be standards, whether that's our issue or the homeowners association, like kind of just, here's how we want our neighborhood standards to look like issue. I hope they would address that. But in looking over the actual language of the changes, as I had mentioned earlier, it's a little bit further than even I was going last time. So I did have some notes, since I would like to see some things addressed or discussed before this comes up for an actual vote at the next meeting, probably.
Right.
Under section 2, which is labeled amendment of chapter 5.10, it says chapter 5.10, peddlers, solicitors, and canvassers, section 510078, fixed stands prohibited. And then it is striking out solicitor and canvasser, and every other section of that only pertains to peddling. So I think that for the label or the subsection label, solicitors and canvassers should be removed from that as well, because that entire subsection doesn't talk about peddling or it doesn't talk about soliciting and canvassing anymore with that change.
If I can say something about that quick?
Sure.
I think I understand where you're coming from, but the chapter 5.10 is peddlers, solicitors, and canvassers is the overall title of the whole chapter, of which this 5.10.078, that's where you're at, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know that we can really change that, because then it excludes it from everywhere else. It's just a reference to the title. It is confusing, and I understand what you're saying, but it's just a reference to the title of the overall chapter 5.10, which does have all three peddlers, solicitors, and canvassers present, because there are areas that do cover peddlers, solicitors, and canvassers. This section only covers peddlers, and I get that creates a little confusion point, but I don't think we can eliminate it there, because it's a reference to the title.
If that's what it is and it's not meant for any other purpose,
Right.
then I understand that. But,
Yep. That's my take. I'll clarify with the attorney, though.
Then moving on to like the main part at issue in all of this, on the next page, section 5.10.079, I see the strikeout of no peddling, soliciting, or solicitation, soliciting, canvassing, and then it would essentially read that no peddler, solicitor, or canvasser shall enter into or upon any property that has posted a no trespassing sign or similar notice. Again, I think that this is a little bit vague, potentially, just saying any property or a property. It doesn't define that it's a private residence or a privately held commercial property or anything. I would hate to see it be argued that homeowners association is a property. It's too gray to me,
General.
when you could very easily say any privately owned residence. Because I don't want to see signs start going up at the front that say no trespassing to kind of circumvent what we're intending to do, hopefully, here. The other issue is again, with the subdivisions, and even listening to residents during Call to the Public, peddling, let's allow signs at neighborhoods that disallow or prohibit peddling. Soliciting, canvassing should not be on those signs. To the point about our one speaker that lives on Pine, though, if you have no soliciting signs, and we kind of got into this when this all came up, with a lot of residents coming to talk about no soliciting and then referring to salespeople. I don't know how much the classifications have changed over time. If a company comes to sell you something, that's technically peddling under what we have now. So I would, just to follow the ordinance, I'd recommend having your signs changed maybe at your neighborhood, if this is how it's adopted, is to disallow peddling, because soliciting is its whole other thing now. That would be my only note there. So just some things I hope get cleaned up and clarified before we truly take action on this. Thank you.
Ms. Garland Fox.
I just have a couple comments about the signs in the window you were talking about. I
Yeah.
wouldn't like to see, in my opinion, the city get involved in that. I don't think we should be telling homeowners what size signs they can put. I agree would be the homeowners association, but I wouldn't want to see this body doing that.
And just as a response to that, I was initially of the same mind, and I just started to talk myself out of it a little bit, just from the standpoint of what if somebody puts up something in a microscopic font, and then some canvasser hits that house and says, I can't read that. I couldn't possibly be expected to read that font size, and shame on the homeowner, it's not my fault, kind of a thing. And that's where I was like of a mixed mind on it. But I understand where you're coming from. So that's why I wanted to get some direction from council about what they felt, because I was kind of talking myself into and out of having that in the ordinance. So, and also something that Councilman Gottschall spoke of, talking about, somebody putting up an 8x8 sign in their yard. That's not something I necessarily want to see either. And that's maybe why we provided the idea of providing some sort of guideline about the size, and the appropriate size of a sign might not be totally unwarranted. But again, I'm just looking for what council's overall direction is on that. I don't have a strong one, obviously, either way.
Mr. Smiley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Ziegler put this all very succinctly. I echo a lot of what he said. And if I can be a little more clunky about it, it's, we're trying, we really want to protect the residents, from aggressive salespeople, or any salespeople, which I guess is peddlers. Councilman Gottschall pointed out some of the things we've gone back and forth on, what's a solicitor versus a peddler. I think we've all learned a lot and have a better grasp of it, but I think we're counting on the attorneys to navigate us through this and get what we want, for the residents. I mean, we're all canvassers up here, or have been at some point, or will be. So, obviously we're not against that. And then we've heard, stories, and some of us have encountered them ourselves, of the aggressive salespeople or peddlers, which we want some defense, against. And then finally, I'm amazed that, what we've done is unprecedented, and there is no, case law on it already. But I also agree, I don't want to start. I don't want to be the first either. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gottschall.
I apologize, I just was looking at my list here. Regarding the keep out list, if we do go that route, because I don't think that would come before us again, it'd be more administratively if that's handled.
Yeah.
My only caution, I guess, would be you would have to track property turnover. Because if a homeowner comes in and says, register my property so I never get bothered again, and then they sell 3 years later, we have to make sure that that property is then added back to the general population, we'll call it. So that might be administrative headache. So that's just something to think about. So, thank you.
And then adding on to something the mayor mentioned, I also wanted to clarify something that I intend to do through the attorneys representing us on this. There was discussion about, we thought we had it kind of straight, so to speak, with the organization that's raised the question in the past. And then you mentioned that if we do go down this path of where we're going currently, that we want to make sure that they're clear on it this time, and we're not setting ourselves up for oh, now I have a problem with that because it says something else that I'm concerned with, right? So what I will ask our city attorney's office to do is we'll put another draft together of the amended ordinance from the feedback that we're having here tonight. And then I would advocate asking them to have a discussion directly with the plaintiff attorneys to say, so is there anything remaining in here that's of issue for you? I'm not going to say that I'm giving them any kind of veto power, but the idea is that, we are trying to address it in such a way that we're going to put an end to this and not have to continue with the lawsuit after this. And that's what I would advocate doing, asking the attorney to try to come to an agreement with them that, yes, this is something that we can both live with, kind of thing.
Well, yeah, and I think as an example, the point that Mr. Cashel brought up with respect to the word private property, or was that private property? Private residence.
Right.
That they're, if they're okay with everything as far as peddling is concerned, and maybe soliciting is concerned, but they didn't see that, and then somebody takes offense at that, 3 weeks after we pass the ordinance, then are we going to be right back here? So it might be a good idea to have them included as far as, again, as you say, not to have veto power over it or anything, but certainly settle the current litigation along with hopefully heading off any potential future litigation.
Certainly, we'll make an effort to do that.
All right. Anybody else want to add anything? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a request to provide conditional approval of final site condominium, VCA site condominium plan for the Cambridge Lane development of 39 single-family residential lots. Do I have a motion?
Support.
Anybody somebody here to make a presentation? Hi, Kevin, how you doing? Been a while.
It's been a while. Kevin Gazier, 30382 Beck Road, Wixom, Michigan, representing LLW Development on this project. We've been through here before on...
Mr. Gazier, over here, just raise that up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Up there so that we get the good pickup on the mic.
Got it.
Thank you.
Been through the process with preliminary site plan, through the planning commission, through the council, then back through final approval with the planning commission, and now coming before you for final site plan approval so we can get started on the subdivision. 39 lot subdivision, basically an extension of Anthem, tributed Anthem there. Same style houses, same square footage, same setup, kind of continue the neighborhood as it's been developed, and just looking to continue the downtown development here.
Okay, thanks. Was there anybody from the administration that was going to make any kind of presentation?
I don't think we're going to make a presentation per se. We do have somebody from CIB Planning that's here to answer questions if there are any. If you want to have something from her, I'm sure she's happy to do that.
Yes, it's Kelly McIntyre from CIB Planning. From our perspective, all the issues have been resolved, and we are satisfied with the plan as presented. We have some conditions that we placed upon the approval, but we are happy with the plan.
Okay. I know that you were here. I know, Kevin, I think you came in a few minutes late, but there were some concerns that were addressed in the first call to the public relative to the the water flow and the,
Sibley Drain.
any,
I'd be happy to address whatever questions you might have. I wasn't, I'm sorry.
well, I guess my question was to find out, are those some of the conditions that are listed, just a conditional approval, right? And are those some of the conditions that we're talking about?
Well, yes, we always have a condition that basically requires review and approval from other consultants, departments, and agencies, and that would include the DEQ. So we defer to DEQ as far as wetlands and drains. We don't handle or look at anything that has to do with this. Because they're the experts, we defer to them to tell us that it's okay. And we would look for permits from the department before we would give them a building permit.
Okay, and were these specific concerns raised by you know, the gentleman said that they came kind of late in the game to the planning commission and didn't get a chance to have those things addressed. Is that?
Did you want?
Yes.
Go ahead, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, no,
Sure.
go ahead.
We've been, Mayor, involved with WRC at Oakland County since day one with the Sibley Drain. It is a Chapter 22 drain. It is managed by WRC. It is their drain, and we have worked with them to clean that drain out. It's never been cleaned out. Clean it out, get it to the original elevations. Gotten all the approvals from them, the permits from them, the permits from the MDEQ. Everybody, every agency that has anything to do with that drain and with the wetlands and the water flow there has issued a permit for that, for this project. We've been through the process. There's been calls to the public. I know for the MDEQ, they send out letters to the homeowners and you know, ask for their input. It's we've been through the complete process and followed every last detail and every step. And if they're unhappy with the water, and to be quite honest, it's, you know, it's been a problem probably for the last 30 years. I mean, the water comes from all the way from the back road into that Sibley drain, making its way through, and you know, we're not adding to the problem. Anything, we've corrected the problem. We've lowered the water table, the actual water. We've cleaned the ditch out. In my opinion, the biggest problem is the bottleneck where it goes under Maple Road. I mean, there's been several times when, myself personally, you remove debris from that, you'll see the water is 2 feet higher on the back side of the grade than it is, you know, on the other side underneath the road. And in my estimation, it's more a maintenance issue than it is, you know, anything else. It is a county drain, and like I say, we don't own it, we don't control it. We're at the direction of WRC to just follow their direction.
Anybody? Ms. Garland Fox?
I have a couple questions. Can I start with Tim?
Sure.
Yes, Tim, a question.
Yes.
Mr. Sigma, sorry. So talking about the drain and the maintenance of the drain, and I know we don't maintain the drain, correct?
Technically, that is an Oakland County drain. We do assist with that. In fact, a couple weeks ago, we had folks out along that drain pulling sticks so that they don't collect as frequently. And I think once the initial debris gets picked up in the spring, it should flow properly. Now there is a tributary, if you will, that is not part of the Sibley drain. It's basically a private storm sewer, and it's not related to the Cambridge project. It goes into the Gunner Matella and a number of properties in between there. The goal would be to establish that, get easements throughout that area as well, and make that part of the Sibley drain at some point in the future. We just have not proceeded with that yet.
So those tributaries that you're talking about, they do not run into Sibley Drain, or they do?
It does run into Sibley Drain, but there's no easements for the county to work on that drain, and we have no easements to work on that drain either. So it's a matter of getting each individual property owner all the way along the way to set up an easement or establish an easement for it.
So could that be contributing then to the issues that's?
It does contribute quite a bit to that issue, yes.
Probably the majority.
And what we did, if you recall, for the tribute, well, actually, it was before you came on council, but a portion of the tribute drain was actually utilized for the Robertson properties. So we took several acres off of the Sibley drain and are re-diverting them over into the tribute drain, which goes straight across under Wixom Road instead of across West Maple. So we're working on a few things, but there are a number of stormwater issues related not only to the Sibley drain, but throughout the individual subdivisions as well that we're working on.
So I'm sensitive to the two residents that came up and spoke, and I just am concerned that if this development is gonna add more to that drain than it can handle, what's gonna happen? Is it gonna get worse, or?
If I might add, it's actually going to help that issue from the standpoint that all of the stormwater on our project now will be diverted into first the forebay and then into a retention area, and then it exits the property. If it fills up, and it exits the property with a 4-inch diameter pipe. So it's holding it back, and then it's releasing it more slowly in the Sibley drain. If that's correct.
That is correct.
So it's going to, the development is actually going to improve the water that goes into the Sibley drain, like a heavy rain or a flash rain or something like that, a heavy downpour. It's because it will be retained on site, and then it'll be released at what's called an agricultural flow off-site into the Sibley drain over time. It might take days for that retention ponds to drop back down over time. So it's, in response to your question, it's going to help it rather than add more to it.
Okay.
I agree with that.
You do agree with that? Okay, so is there anything we can do, and maybe there's not, but I'm just wondering, is there anything we can do to help those residents?
Yeah, I'm going to amplify something that Mr. Gager said, and that's that the city doesn't govern the drains that are in play there. The Water Resources Commissioner and/or the DEQ does. So he stated that he's got permits from those, whatever organizations are required, and what I will commit to is that we will make sure I's are dotted and T's are crossed and things are approved by those organizations as they should have been, and that we're not having a situation that isn't cleared through those organizations as this development progresses. That's what we can commit to. But the drains are not our responsibility to maintain and to ensure their continuing functionality based on these kind of projects. It's the responsibility of the Water Resources Commission and the DEQ potentially, depending on the situation. So we'll make sure that those I's are dotted and T's are crossed and clearances are provided by those organizations that allow us to proceed on this project with the developer. That's what I think we can do.
I'm just, I guess, going back to the residents and talking about how that drain was changed, people coming in and changing it.
That was regulated by WRC, and they brought it back down to the original grades based off of the culvert that is at West Maple Road, I'm sorry.
Oh,
West
okay.
Maple Road.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Resnick.
Yeah, maybe this one's for Tim. In terms of that, the choke point going underneath Maple Road, especially during construction phase and when, earth is being moved and all, can we make sure that we have a lot of communication with Oakland County and have that cleaned as necessary? I believe that off of Loon Lake Road, not the cliffs, but the one on the north side of Loon Lake Road, there was an issue there too into the drain, and we just stepped up the frequency with which that was monitored and cleaned out, and it improved the flow. So we do that as well.
Mr. Smiley.
Thank you. Tim, you mentioned that we assist the county with cleaning, maintaining that drain. Have we done it? Have we done it this spring already?
We have done it, yeah.
Okay, and it's annual, once a year it's done?
When it's periodically throughout the year.
Oh, okay,
When
so
it
it's
rains.
done as needed? Okay.
And they also monitor it. They're not as quick to respond as we are.
I'm sure.
I guess on that. And we've utilized our ASP group, our alternative service program, which is a volunteer group that helps us with that. So.
Oh, wonderful. All right, thank you, all of you.
Mr. Resnick?
Mr. Mayor, I had one more thing, not related to the drain, though, in my notes regarding the proposed development. And I brought this to Mr. Aventini many times in these developments, is that these 5-foot wide connectors to bike pathways are not sufficient. I know that we had initially had something like that in our PUD when we did the first Wixom property, and we had that changed into 6-foot or 8-foot. And I know it was approved by Planning Commission at 5 feet, but those are not enough for the type of traffic, the foot traffic and bike mixed-use traffic. So 5 foot is what we used to have in Detroit back in the 50s and 60s.
It is actually 10-foot easement, but they were proposing.
Right, the actual
provide-
pad itself is only 5 foot, yeah.
But there is room potentially to increase that.
Yeah. I just note that I'd like to see it at 6 or 8 foot if you were to have bicycles and strollers and rollerbladers. And that, it currently says gravel pathway on the plan, but by the time this development is completed, that will be a complete asphalted ribbon.
Actually,
So
on the plan is concrete.
it says to gravel trailway use on lot
Oh,
17.
it's
Yep.
to the gravel,
Yep.
yes, you're right, the bike path.
Yeah,
Right, ours is-
your connector would be concrete, but the pathway won't be gravel in September. So.
Right.
Mr. Beagle?
Thanks. So I'm looking at the blueprint here, and your sediment basement, basin is behind property lots 1 and 2, correct?
That's correct.
And then you've got trees and stuff around it, which is nice, and is that the proposed decorative fence gonna go around that to the basin?
It will go around the, the one on the west side. It won't go around the one on the east side because that has shallower slopes or flatter slopes.
Yeah, I would like to see a fence around that if possible.
Well, the only, I'm kind of adverse to the fence thing because there's going to be very little water in there standing and probably no water in it at all most of the time, 99% of the time.
Okay.
But it's a very gentle slope. I mean, it's almost like just a little depression in there.
All right, but if it's sometime and it does start to retain water and stuff like that,
I'll revisit the issue if it
Okay.
becomes a problem.
Okay, and then with that basin, will you be treating that like with stuff to keep the mosquitoes and stuff away from the residents, or?
Well, the idea is that there won't be any standing water in there. That's the first thing. But the one to the west, it's very possible that could have standing water in it.
Okay.
And that's going to be up to once it's turned over to the homeowners association what they decide they would like to do with it. I mean, if they want to spend the money to do it, I can't say that. Yeah, I'm going to perpetually provide some mosquito control for the subdivision, but
Yeah, I just think that's, we do it in our basins and stuff like that. I think that should be considered. Thanks.
Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, I would certainly like to make sure that we keep an eye on this and make sure that the concerns are addressed that were brought up earlier in the evening. And it's unfortunate that these concerns weren't addressed at the plan. I'm not saying you didn't address them, but they weren't raised at the Planning Commission meeting in timely fashion, and maybe there could have been more discussion about that at that time. But in any event, we have a request to provide a motion and a second to provide conditional approval of final site condominium VCA site condominium plan for Cambridge Lane development of 39 single-family residential lots. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is the second call to the public. I've read the rules already. I think everybody knows the rules. So if anybody would like to come up and address the council on anything that's on their mind, sort of within reason, but
Deborah Moylanen, 2548 Pine, Wixom. I'd just like to comment on both number 6 and possibly number 7. Number 6, I strongly support peddler portion. I'm a little concerned about removing solicitors. We do very rarely, but occasionally get organizations that, such as Acorn, that want money. So I do have a little bit of concern about that, but I understand your position, and I'll deal with peddlers if that's all we can deal with. On number 7, my only comment is, I back up to Maple Road. The traffic is absolutely horrendous and extremely loud with their double trailers going down the roads. And hopefully somewhere in this, they're gonna take care of Wixom Road when they're done, because they're making a mess of it. If there's a way to slow down those trucks, because I do think they're speeding, although I obviously don't know for sure. If there's a way to slow them down and get the quiet back in the neighborhood, especially as summer's coming up, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, I just to comment on some of the issues that came up at a subdivision meeting that I attended last night. A lot of the traffic in that area and other areas in the city, actually. And one of the things that we're looking forward to is in the budget that we just worked on and hopefully will pass here pretty soon, I think at the next meeting. We're going to be adding a police officer to the ranks, and that will enable us to, the police department, to designate a full-time traffic enforcement officer, and those are some of the things that that officer will be responsible for and we'll be looking into. We'll take complaints like you've just made, and we'll be able to develop plans to ensure that your concerns are addressed and that we get a handle on some of the increased traffic flow that we've experienced due to all the building that's going on. And so hopefully you'll notice that hopefully shortly. Yeah, hopefully. Thanks for your comments.
Hi, Nicholas Spagnolo, 3066 Bennington Drive. I just wanted to thank you guys for your discussion today and just ask a couple of things, I guess, heading into next. I guess the meeting will be 2 weeks from now. Is that the next time the city council meets?
So.
Okay.
28th for enactment, correct.
Okay. One would be if it's possible to vote on separate measures of the ordinance change in separate votes rather than having everything be wrapped up in one big package. Just so that the issues that are at hand for this suit that we have could be handled in a separate vote than perhaps all of the changes, in case there's concerns about solicitation or what have you, that those necessarily not get tied up with the changes that we're requesting. And then whatever proposed changes are made, if there could be, I don't know if there's a way to post those publicly. I know that in the winter, when this last happened, I got caught unaware what the actual final language was of the proposed amendment, got to the meeting, and somebody had a printout, but I never saw anything on the county or on the city website. So if there's any way, it sounds like maybe our lawyers will be seeing something, which was great. But if there's any way to post that publicly as well so other people can see that as well, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Anybody else? Seeing no one, I'll close the second call to the public. City manager's comments.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a couple things I wanted to highlight. Our new administrative secretary in the city manager's office, Anna Cluas Rosenthal, just completed human resource specialist certification. And I wanted to congratulate her. She did that pretty accelerated fashion. It's a 3-year window to complete that certification program. She had started it before she joined with the city, and she had completed the requirements in 8 months, which is a testament to her commitment to that, and we appreciate that. And that's a new certification of somebody on our staff that will benefit the city, and we appreciate that. Secondly, I'd like to mention under the city manager's office as well, that we received recognition of a Loss Control Achievement Award from the Michigan Municipal League Workers' Compensation Fund. Roughly speaking, there's just about 100 communities that are involved, and we had one of the 2 highest improvement ratings out of those nearly 100 communities, which is also something that I want to congratulate all the employees, frontline employees, supervision, and everybody else that's involved in committing to having a safer work environment and reducing workplace injuries. So that translates to our bottom line as a result of that improved performance in 2018-19. We had saved just about $100,000 on our premium, and in 19 and 20, it's forecast to also go down by another $3,600 on that, so over $100,000 in savings by virtue of that improved performance, and that's something I want to be appreciative of all of our city staff for their efforts to be very attentive to having a safe work environment and to conducting their work in a way that's safe and protects them from injury. Other things in there, construction and development services, once upon a time we had an agenda item where we were talking about doing imaging and archiving of data that would reduce long-term storage costs with the company that handles that for us, and that's something that's being actively pursued by construction and development services with 35 boxes that have been pulled from Corrigan, scanned, and then as opposed to being returned to storage, being destroyed, and that saves us on our bottom line as well. So I wanted to point that out. That's going as we had hoped, and expect to see more progress on that in the future. There's other areas we'll look at that as well to see if we can reduce our storage costs and increase the use of electronic storing of documents. We mentioned the Derby Day was recently completed there. Your new appointee to the DDA board, Vanessa Willett, mentioned that. That was a very successful event. Congratulations to the DDA and all the participants and the volunteers that made that possible. And then congratulations to Kathy Buck and to Crystal Polko, our clerk and deputy clerk, for their efforts in completing a very successful school election. Interestingly, there was an additional day that they were open on Saturday. New requirements are they are open between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. the Saturday before election to accept additional absentee voters. In the presidential election, they had 35 absentee voters on the Saturday before the election, and in this election, where turnout was far less than in that presidential election, we had 53 absentee voters that came in and took care of business on that day. So that was an interesting development. They had a pretty busy Saturday, from what I heard. So. Congratulations to them, and congratulations to the school for the successful passage of their bond issue there. Those are the only things that I was going to mention. There's various dates on the flip side of the city manager's update that are important, but I'll leave those to your individual perusal there. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or try at least.
Thanks. Council comments, Mr. Beagle.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you and congratulate Vanessa Willett on her appointment to the DDA, and a big thank you to the clerk's office for another successful election. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smiley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to just add in to welcome and thank Miss Willett for her DDA and giving her time to the city. I know Kathy and Crystal did another great job. It was a fairly small turnout election, but I know you have to be prepared for it not being small, so you're always ready. And while I'm at it, I want to thank all the volunteers that work the 4 precincts. They're a great bunch of people, and I'm sure Kathy will be the first to tell you how wonderful it is to have them. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Grumland-Fox.
I would just echo all the comments already stated. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gottschall.
Likewise, just echo the other congratulations and thanks to our newest DDA member. And then also just, I know I'd asked you before the meeting whether she was a business owner in this area, in the DDA or downtown area. And I like the perspective of just having essentially a resident member on there to help give our representation to residents as well, rather than just business owners. So I think that's unique and nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Resnick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'd also like to thank Vanessa Willett for stepping up and joining our DDA, and it's great to see the energy there and a lot of the events. Thanks to all the residents that came out today. It's a great attended meeting. And also, just a note to everybody, warm weather is back this week. We've come out of our extended deep freeze. Watch out for bicycles and motorcycles and runners. I've seen a lot of close calls. We've had one day of sunshine and warm weather, and just be aware when you're making those left turns, look up and down those sidewalks. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd also just like to comment on Ms. Willett. I've mentioned this before, that when I got to become the mayor, I was automatically a member of the DDA. And, you know, I've always read their minutes and kind of kept up to date with what they were doing, kind of. But once I started going to the meetings, and I found them to be a very, very dedicated group of people. And that's where the electricity is right now, I think, in the city. I think there's a lot of energy there. Kind of reminds me of the early days of city council going through different studies and going through different issues and trying to develop a very active DDA. And I think that Ms. Willett will bring that to the DDA, because she's, as you could see when she was introduced, she's full of energy, and I know that she's full of ideas too, because I've talked to her before. And I also just want to say that I appreciate when people come to the council meetings and when they stay for the whole meeting. You know, some people come and when their issue is done with, and I don't mind the people that are, you know, come here that have an issue that they're, maybe they like the people that are here from a business, Mr. Gazier, for instance, his issues. But the people from the community, when you come and your issue is addressed, I like it when you stay around. I really appreciate it because you get a good sense of what this is all about, not just your issues. So, and thanks for those that come to a lot of meetings too. I appreciate that too. So, having said that, I'll entertain a motion.
Your Honor,
Oh, I'm
one thing
sorry.
before I wanted to readdress something here. Earlier on, we were talking about the city attorney's presence, and I was
Yes.
expecting she was going to be here, and that,
Yeah.
and I think what we had here was a failure to communicate clearly. I just had I just listened to a message from her, and I'd heard it the first time, and I kind of blew off a section of her message that kind of indicated she wasn't going to be here, and I thought it was a miscommunication. But upon reflection and her lack of being here, I think we did have a misunderstanding. I just wanted to be clear on that, and I don't know whose misunderstanding was responsible, but I'll take responsibility for that. I think that I was expecting her to be here, but I think there might have been something where she was of a different mindset, and I'm going to clarify that with her. But I just
Well, frankly, I think we did pretty well
And I
without her,
think it came
so
out
I don't really mind that she didn't make it. So,
yes. I just
thanks.
wanted to clarify that.
Appreciate
I apologize
that.
for the miscommunication. That's what I think happened.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Support?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Let's go home.